I'm Stuart Preston, and this is the Stoned Ape Reports, where I have conversations with those who have changed their lives with the power of psychedelics. Quick announcement, I now have a book out titled The Grief Trip, How I Learned to Heal with Grief and Psychedelics. You can find it at www.thegrieftrip.com. 100% of proceeds go to the Ian Preston Memorial Fund to help support mental health and suicide prevention. Okay, back to the podcast. In this episode, I had the honor of speaking with filmmaker Mitch Schultz, who brought us the legendary documentary DMT, the Spirit Molecule. Now he's back and working on the sequel, DMT, the Conscious Molecule. He shared his thoughts on consciousness, DMT, and his own psychedelic experiences. So let's hear from Mitch Schultz. Well, thank you so much for coming here on the Stoned Ape Reports. I'm honored to have you here. Obviously, everybody knows, about your first film, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And so very excited for what's coming from you next. But first of all, just thanks for coming and doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here and be back out in the world chatting a little bit. So.
Yeah. I understand. I hear you. So I guess I want to start off with, this podcast, as we talked a little bit about already, is really kind of about, transformation, healing, even using psychedelics and things that go on. So I was wondering if you wouldn't be willing to kind of share your story of,
Sure.
I don't know if it's trauma, loss, whatever's going on, and how DMT and maybe other psychedelics have helped you with that journey.
Sure. Maybe kind of a large overview of my life. I had a lot of compounding traumas in my life, and some of that was physical accidents. Some of it was parents' divorce and struggles with that. The sexual abuse, then started using drugs probably around 14 years old, and not in a very smart way. And it was pretty reckless. And I was just trying to understand myself and what was going on and all this chaos. And I had no way of interpreting that. I feel like I was lucky to have psychedelics early on in my life and kind of get a sense of what that space is, or those spaces, if you will. And so I had some insights. It's like, okay, I remember this being magical and mystical and wonderful early on in high school, but then kind of fell into harder stuff and was, abusing a lot. And I think this compounding nature of a lot of these things just kept the same behavior patterns going over time. And I think the biggest thing to kind of top that off was the loss of my brother a decade ago to an opiate overdose. And, thinking throughout the different experiences of my life that have been challenging, I thought I'd gone through a lot. That was the biggest one. It was the hardest thing that I've ever had to face, I think. It was interesting that when that happened, my response for a year was not to touch anything,
really,
alcohol, psychedelics, even. And it was something that was telling me just to feel, to feel what this emotion was and what was going on, and try to understand it from purely kind of emotional and also physical sense without trying to dampen it with anything.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had put out the film and a little bit of, about 10 years of research even prior to that, about psychedelics, and I'd used them to start having a more intentional focus while I was putting the film together, and kind of found them into my late 30s or mid 30s, I guess, again, and found a lot about myself, which ultimately I think is what we're doing as we go through our lives. We evolve and we develop, as we're learning more and we're having a broader and broader kind of perspective or outlook on our life and ourselves. And but that loss of my brother put all of that stuff back into perspective really quick, and took all those things that I thought I knew again, and threw them out the window. So it was almost like starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But after that year and knowing the how far I had come, and I give psychedelics probably full credit for saving my life and getting me out of suicidal thoughts and even an attempt early on in my life. So to be able to kind of say, I know that there's something here, and start to revisit that and then be able to work through these different layers of the trauma. It's not just all of the traumas, but that each one of those experiences has these multi-layered kind of aspects that we have to kind of weed out and understand and see how they tie back into us being kids and relationships and how we love ourselves. And, ultimately, I think it's a never ending kind of story, which I at times can feel frustrating, at other times can feel absolutely beautiful and poetic from the universe, that this is an ongoing, ever learning process. And to me, that's exciting. That, hopefully I can keep reminding myself of that this is an ongoing process, and there's even things that I thought I had figured out and learned and dealt with in my past that at times will still come up. So it's not to say that you have to eat psychedelics every day to address that. In fact, I think it's wise to do a lot of research, take into account psychiatrists and science and the people you're with and where you're going, and also the integration. It's not just about the experience, but then like, how do you take those experiences and put them into something tangible in your life? And how you're moving around and hopefully, in my case, celebrating my brother and letting him in some ways live on through me. It's I don't know if I wrapped all that up in that question you had asked in there, but
you sure did.
Played a huge role for me, and they've taught me a lot about myself. They've helped heal trauma, and I think there's even possibilities for psychedelics to teach humans much more than just healing trauma. I think
it sounds like it.
Point. Yeah. So
this sequel, it does sound like you're kind of going into that next plane of consciousness, that next level, whatever it is we talk about. That's, which I find fascinating. For me, I have another podcast that, I don't record any new episodes, but it went 2 or 3 years, called the Consciousness Podcast. And so the looking into human consciousness and trying to understand it, and you talk to people that have near-death experiences and things like that, and every time they do, I kind of think, sounds almost like DMT. It sounds like there's something involved there. So what kind of inspired you then to come back after all this time and make a sequel to that amazing film?
Well, I'll give a lot of credit to my producer for saying, "Hey, it's been about a decade. It's time for a new story. A lot's happened."
Let's go do it.
So thanks, Andrew, for getting me off. I think there's been almost an entire lifetime of things that have led to this. Obviously, there's the psychedelic side and my rediscovery of psychedelics and that healing. But you just mentioned people having out-of-body experiences and kind of other altered states without having entheogens be part of that. And I had a lot of those experiences when I was young, way before I touched psychedelics, that some would say mystical or even alien at times, angelic. There were beings, there were loss of time, out of body, all sorts of different things. And I learned that I needed to shut up about those early on because parents were concerned, and I'd go to the doctor, or people look at you a little differently when you start talking about some of these things, particularly at your age. And so I just learned how to kind of clamp that down. But with my first DMT experience, one of the most amazing things about it was that all of that past guilt, shame, worry about those experiences, although I knew they were deeply profound and impacted me in some amazing ways, made complete sense. And so there was a commonality within that DMT experience that was timeless, that was universal, and really kind of unitive consciousness, if you will. And they tied into the other experiences that I had been having that I think led me into psychedelics. And so after we released the DMT film, and I started trying to understand, myself a little bit more and how I've developed and how I've changed and who I was and who I am and who I'm becoming and all of those things, consciousness is that kind of base thing that we leave out of all the equations. Everything that we're doing and seeing and talking about is all perceived through human consciousness, which we don't know anything about, or consciousness in general. But we'll keep it at the human consciousness level for now.
Right.
And throughout different research and poking around and starting to see a lot of other disciplines pointing to, trying to rectify the relative states of science, and then the quantum world, and then kind of the experiential sessions of DMT and kind of out of body experience and mystical states, there seems to be a lot of things pointing to the entire universe being conscious, not only perceiving reality, but also generating that reality. And that got really fascinating. And so I've been looking kind of into that. And some people will describe this as a simulation theory or panpsychism. And really the idea is that the entire universe, and even all the way down to very simple building blocks of the entire universe, are conscious. And that is this participatory, kind of complementary kind of dance that's going on, as opposed to us having, or at least perceiving having, this free will. And that became very fascinating. And then tying in DMT to that whole strand was, well, how does the universe go from a big bang all the way through to humanity to get us here? And then these two or even several molecules, super psychedelic, there's NN-DMT and then 5-MeO with very different experiences. Mm-hmm. How does all of that story from the beginning of the universe tie into us, and then also these molecules in between that are showing us other worlds, other places, other aspects of self or beings? And so that was really kind of the crux of it. It's this kind of long journey and kind of just ongoing curiosity of the world around me and myself, and trying to understand past experiences from psychedelic and mystical states that were not induced by it.
Yeah.
So it's been a ride, and I think a lot of this too now just kind of coming back out as we're putting the film together is trying to chew on these ideas a little bit with everybody out there and in the public, and podcasts and articles, and just trying to throw some things out and start having this conversation a little more deeply.
Outstanding. Have you already started interviewing some of the experts in this? Or are you already in the planning stages? How far along are you?
Yeah, so we're in our pre-production phase and kind of development. Everything's kind of lining up. We've got a pretty good list of people that we would like to interview for this, and we will have a different kind of cast of characters. Probably bring back about 5 to 8 of the original cast members, I believe, and then from there kind of expand it out, hopefully beyond the psychedelic realm a little bit, and bring in some quantum physicists and AI researchers, philosophers, other things that will help explain what some of those experiential sessions might be.
Yeah, because it gets really from meditation, psychedelic use, dream states. There seems to be a blur in what reality means and what consciousness even is. Right. Do you have some notions of that? Is this purely an exploratory thing for you, or is this something you spend time thinking about and have your own ideas that you are kind of looking to learn more about, confirm, or deny? Where do you stand on DMT and consciousness?
Well, I think it's any and all of that you just mentioned. There's a curiosity, there's just this ongoing, but it's also about trying to kind of pick apart a little bit and get my ideas and into a little bit of a focus. I do think that there is a universal consciousness that kind of all time and space exist at all the time. That we think about our relatives, our ancestors that are maybe past or gone. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a matter of perspective of where that individual, like it's almost a software program within the matrix, right? And wherever it is at any given point in time, it's perceiving itself. Or I think that there's also something to it. I'm not a scientist or a quantum physicist, but even the idea of dark matter and understanding that there's some other physical thing that's acting, or even energetic field that's playing with that, and most of the universe seems to be made up of it. That I think that is actually our history and our future that we're peering back trying to see. We just can't see from our perspective and where our planet is, that in our solar system, within the galaxy, within that state or that string, if you will.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I see you mentioned the Matrix, and I see a lot of, maybe this is just confirmation bias on my part, but I feel like a lot of people who explore psychedelics or deep meditation or go down the Eastern philosophy path and really get deep into their own consciousness and end up tapping into what feels like a greater consciousness. We all go back and watch the Matrix movie again. You know what I mean? You're like, holy cow, there was stuff in there that I'm suddenly relating to
Yeah.
that went right over my head before. And so you're actually looking to talk to some of the people who study this and talk about these things and understand these things that are around
Absolutely.
that kind of level of consciousness.
Absolutely. And really, hopefully, maybe hopefully my place is through a lot of my experiences that I believe maybe a lot of academics may not have had. They can talk about it theoretically, mathematically, break a lot of things down, but to have the experience and be able to describe that in a number of ways, and hopefully in a way that's at least somewhat grounded. I've had enough of these experiences throughout my life that they're not necessarily just alarming or kind of overwhelming, that I can kind of navigate the space and then have some discussion with some of these folks to maybe connect some dots for some people. And then I think DMT particularly, I look at the NN-DMT experience, the way people kind of describe this kind of ultra fractal, oversaturated in information state as kind of the quantum code being kind of revealed to us. It's like the Terrace describes it as the machine elves, but these energetic kind of particles being able to build up, and we can pull back our curtains of normal human consciousness and see that. And then the 5-MeO state seems to be much more of that pure universal consciousness where you're highly aware of self, physical self, as well as this extra dimensional self, and everything's emanating in and out of you. It feels like, and there's this universal kind of core piece to that, as opposed to the oversaturation of just little pieces or building blocks. And that's kind of the 5-MeO seems more like this whole on idea of we're just a small tiny piece of this puzzle, that is active and aware, but it's really only out of the universe producing us to be aware of itself that we are aware. So it's a fun space. It's a challenging space, but I think there are a lot of people that have had experiences that they're trying to wrap their heads around. And as our technology is changing and growing, right now the Matrix seems like a great analogy. In many ways it is, but I have a feeling that it's much more complex than that, and not as much of the conspiracy side. I think that it's even bigger than that, and more profound than that, than we could ever imagine. Because I don't think anyone on this planet really knows what's going on. We're all just coming together with what we have at any given point in time and doing our best to make a decision or be led to a decision in many ways.
Yeah, and you get a small glimpse of it, like you said. You go into a 5-MeO experience and suddenly feel connected to every other point of energy, every other soul in this grand consciousness. At the same time, be able to feel your own body, like, okay, there's this meat suit part of this, and there's this greater consciousness part of this. What does that mean? It all comes from this, amazing chemical, which this chemical, as you mentioned in some of your stuff out there, is endogenous, right? It's we have this in our bodies. So you're thinking that there's probably some connection there, that it's not even necessarily smoking or ingesting the external chemical in a way which gives us an amazing access, right? But you're thinking that there's some internal built-in connection or access from this endogenous DMT.
I do. And I'm not the one necessarily pulling these ideas. Strassman laid a lot of this out, even just as a kind of basic reality marker. Small little adjustments in the DMT and the endogenous levels can maybe not have noticeable effects from your consciousness, but can on many different levels, kind of underneath the operating system, if you will. I also, there's this gravity element that, if I'll switch it slightly towards, we don't fully quite understand what this what gravitational force is in many ways. Right. And I get a sense that gravity is consciousness falling into physical space. And almost kind of like coming into that black hole, or that oneness down into what this is here, as we call physical reality. We forget about all the other stuff that's going on, and it's like just this limited, narrow bandwidth. And that's where I think DMT could be playing a role in that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you're right. Gravity is kind of an unknown thing. Some people theorize like a graviton, like a particle. Particles don't really, they're a particle and they're a wave and they're, a field. Maybe there's a consciousatron, this kind of the same thing, that there's a consciousness field and a consciousness wave and a consciousness particle, and each of our consciousnesses are a collapsing of that field, in this brain. And maybe there's some kind of something going on in there with the DMT that facilitates that collapse and that connection.
Yep. That's kind of what I'm sensing anyways. And there's a lot of this is through DMT experiences and being aware, taking notes of what it's like coming back into this physical space. And that's the other part about this, is it's almost like a two-dimensional, it's like photographs being stacked on top of one another. We perceive it as this physical 3D reality, but it's almost like these plates of information that are getting laid on top of each other that make us perceive it this particular way.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know a lot of what this is, and I'm trying to understand it from a non-scientific mind, even though I've been curious and read a lot of stuff. But it's still, putting those words to it. A lot of times it's challenging, unless you're Terrence, and then it's very easy, and you could just rip them off, or Dennis. And then understanding kind of some of these concepts that DMT seems to be playing, for me at least, some role. In the matrix of all of that. And there's the matrix again, but it's not just DMT, it's kind of every molecule and every atom and things out in the universe. It's this quantum effect that's just constantly in dance and movement and in reflection of itself at any given point in time. So yes, DMT is where we're focusing, but I think it's kind of everything, really.
Yeah. What are you most excited about with this film? What are you excited? Who are you excited to talk to? What are you excited to learn? I mean, what kind of, is motivating you and exciting you to every day put in the work to do this? What are you hoping to get out of it?
Well, I don't know if it's anything for me personally. I mean, although I could say, like, I think the species needs a new story to understand itself. I mean, a lot of the narratives that we've been using throughout our species are a little outdated. The next layer of those mythologies that have kind of been ruling this planet is kind of scientific understanding. And now those two have been in conflict in many ways, but now it's like, all right, well, how do we take all these mythologies and amazing understandings of self and space and time within kind of mythological stories into how we understand the rational mind and how we have to prove information to make it verifiable. But then what is that kind of transrational element, that knowing? I mean, once you have a psychedelic experience, there's this sense of knowing that that experience was somewhat realer than this reality, or however it's stated, but it has a different resonance than our normal waking state. And looking around the world, and everybody's feeling it and seeing it. It seems like all of our institutions and everybody's kind of on the edge, and the pandemic and political and racial and social injustice, it just goes on and on. We seem to be kind of driving ourselves off a cliff. And we are a global species. We are no longer separated, and we're interacting, and we need to figure out a way to live together is the bottom line. And I hope that, again, not that it's just this film, but even just having the discussion, that people can start to understand that everything that we're doing is creating the reality that we find ourselves in, and the people that we look at as other or out there or around the world, they're us as well. I mean, that's kind of the level I want to bring it to, is that every time we're doing something that we think, or pointing out something that we think is wrong, we're really kind of pointing back to ourselves. And it's eating us up. It's eating us up around the world in many, many different ways. So I'm hoping just to open the discussion to start really seeing where these connections are with us and humans in general, so we can kind of come to the table with a little bit less, or a little bit more of an even playing field in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you get that sense, when you're working with these substances, you get this sense that we're all connected, that we're all one. And then you turn on the news, and we're not behaving that way at all.
Right.
It's like we're totally disconnected. So part of your hope is to understand that connection and potentially inspire people to maybe wake up to it, or to understand it and experience it in whatever path they get to experience it, but it just somehow. Awesome.
Yeah, I don't think psychedelics are for everybody. I don't take the Leary approach that everybody should be taking them. I think we all have our own paths, and there's different ways to find this space and these kind of awakenings. So it doesn't have to be psychedelics.
Yeah, many
Although they
paths
are
up the
nice.
mountain. Yeah, yeah, and you're right, and they can be fun. There's a lot of semi-elitist attitude of oh, I'm doing this, I'm spiritual, and I'm getting enlightened, and every now and then some of it's just fun. There's parts of it that are just interesting, and then later you discover, hey, there was actually more than just fun happening.
Exactly.
Even though that's all I was trying.
Yep.
What else should we know about? Do you want to get out there about the film? What haven't I asked you about making the film, producing the film, anything other than the details? We'll talk about the details about the release here in a second. But what else do you want to get out there that I haven't asked you?
Well, I'm just excited to go sit down with some amazing minds again. I think that one of the most amazing experiences of shooting the first film, we interviewed 50 amazing people across a lot of different disciplines, from artists, people that were in the study. And I felt like I had another degree out of just sitting down and having these interviews with 50 people. So opening up to some new folks and being able to kind of go out and have some new discussions and kind of pick apart. I'm very excited about that. And I'm really excited about being able to share that again with the world and the community and our audience, because we put out all of our original interviews that we used 1% of what we shot in the first film. So I was like, I can't let this other 99% just sit there. There's too much good content. So much that needs to be explored. And I think a lot of people really appreciated that, and I can't wait to do that again on this next go round.
I don't know if you can do this without insulting anybody, but is there anybody you're particularly excited to be talking to?
Let's see here. Well, so I do want to pull in some AI philosophers, people that are discussing it, people that are researching it. I've got Neil deGrasse Tyson on there and Elon Musk, and kind of like to pick their brains a little bit too on the fear that's going on behind this AI, because I think that is part of that's really what gets us into a lot of the trouble as humans, is that we act out of fear in many ways. We're not even aware that we're acting out of fear. And it's fascinating to me, Elon, for instance, having this, talking about this apocalyptic, the machines will take over or whatever. Yet he's developing the Neuralink, and so he's going straight into the storm as he's fighting against it. And it's human nature, and I understand at least a little bit of that. But it's fascinating to me that is kind of the microcosm of what we do as a species. That what is the fear around this whole thing? And the other, I guess, bigger piece is with that AI, quote unquote AI. I think it does it disservice to call it artificial. And this is another big thing I'd like people to get out of this is computers are natural. Our cities are natural. We are dreaming these up in our heads. We are natural, part of the universe. We're using natural elements to go build them. And it's not that it's not natural or that we need to get back to nature. We are in nature. We're in the singularity. We're not going towards the singularity. We're living in the singularity. And so understanding that life is no longer what it used to be, and that complexity and that change will continue to happen and continually speed up, at least from the perspective that we're in. So just kind of maybe changing some of the assumptions that we walk around with is the other kind of layer there, whether it's AI or just kind of our day-to-day interactions with people, questioning why you do some things, or why we say something, or why we treat somebody a particular way, even just some of those basic things, and understanding that it's impactful, even though we may not think it is.
Yeah, outstanding. Yeah, so I feel like when they announced that Dune was going to come out, I feel like I had to wait forever, and I was really impatient, and I didn't like waiting. And now I'm feeling the same way over again. So when is this thing going to potentially land? How long do we have to wait for this? And what are your plans as far as release and distribution and those kind of things?
So, we don't want this to take 5 years like the first one by any means. We are, like I said, kind of in the early stages, but we have a lot of things in place. And so we're doing some last poking around for some fundraising on a few places. But our goal is to start shooting in early 2022. We'll be shooting at several places around the world. And then I've been working with my animators for years, but for the last year, kind of developing some concepts, and instead of waiting to bring them on at the end, they're part of the development process, my editor as well. And so we should be able to kind of go out very strategic with our shoots. And we're hoping that by 2023 at the latest, we're going to have that thing ready to go. So we're looking about a year and a half.
Nice.
Something like that.
Outstanding. Well, compared to 5 years, that's pretty fast.
It feels much better. And part of what we're doing now is kind of getting back out and being able to have these discussions. And then we want to share basically our creative process and our research process with the community. It's part of our, I hate the word marketing in many ways, but it's part of our way to communicate and market and understand these ideas ourselves, but then share that in real time with the community out there.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Well, we're all very excited for this. And you're right. Watching even the first film, I felt like I got like a little mini master's degree,
Right.
and so the people you're going to talk to on this, it's like you're taking all these concepts. I don't want to say to the next level. It's almost like to the proper level, with this looking at reality and consciousness and our internal connection to this larger thing that we all experience. So I'm very excited for this. Is any last thing you want to get out there before we wrap up?
No, I would just say maybe for anybody that's interested in blockchain and NFTs, we're getting ready to release some in the next few months as part of our fundraising process, and hopefully taking that NFT artwork to another level as well, because we want to kind of stand out, but also give some tools and some beautiful work to people that also is democratized. So it's not just these big crypto whales that are coming in,
Right.
but also are normal people day to day that want to participate in this space. So
also, how do people find that?
So that's going to be, we've launched a couple new sites, dmt-nft.com.
Okay.
Still kind of upgrading that site, but there should be some information there for starting point. And then within the next month and a half, we'll have some solid dates on that release.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mitch, I'm really honored that you came on here. I'm super excited for this film. So thank you so much for everything you do for the world. And I wish you the greatest of luck as you develop it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on and being able to have the discussion. So
awesome. Thank you. That concludes this edition of the Stoned Ape Reports. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at Stoned Ape Comedy and subscribe to our newsletter at www.stonedapecomedy.com. Again, thanks for listening and catch you next time, Stoned Apes.